And so the lesson here is that emotions which seem to happen to you are actually made by you.
Do you believe that what you see influences how you feel? Because actually the opposite is true. How you feel within your body, or affect, influences your senses. Now, these bodily senses within your body are known as interoception, or otherwise known as your internal perception. As we continue this series in understanding our layers of personal mastery, the next profound teacher is Lisa Feldman Barrett. And she says, an emotion is your brain's creation of what your bodily sensations mean in relation to what is going on around you in your world. Dealing with our emotions is the challenge, and it requires a multifaceted approach, including the physical, the emotional, the spiritual, and the energetic levels. And so to continue this, today is going to be looking at the physical or the physiological level to how we make emotions. So in today's video, you're going to learn how interoception influences your brain, and then how your brain develops its responses to the outside world. You're going to learn what your body budget is and how to balance it. You're going to learn the difference between emotion, mood, and affect. And finally, I'm going to teach you 3 techniques to use with regards to interoception in your life, so it becomes very, very applicable in your day-to-day. So if you're new to my videos, please click the subscribe button and click the bell. That way you'll be notified each and every time I release new videos. So when you've done that, let's dive straight into this fascinating topic with Lisa Feldman Barrett. I'm Richard Hussaini, a coach and speaker, and here to support you along your path to personal mastery. And one of the most challenging aspects of personal mastery is understanding our thoughts, feelings, and actions. So on to part 1 of today's video, how interoception influences our brain and how our brain tells us to respond to the world. So without developing our awareness, we are at the mercy of what's happening within our head, behind our eyes, the stories, the narrative that keep coming up. But what if that's not true? What if our brain is interpreting the senses within our body and then creating the emotions and narratives that we experience?
I'm a psychologist and a neuroscientist, and in my lab, we study why people have these surprising visual experiences. And here is the secret. What you see is influenced by how you feel. Your mood influences what you see, your vision, what you hear, your hearing, and every sense that you have, smell and taste and touch.
So then interoception, as we've said, is that idea that our sensations are being experienced by our brain, and then our brain makes its best guess or interprets those to fit into our world. So have you been aware of that? Have you been aware of how you're feeling within your body, which then sparks a reaction in your mood, in your actions outside? Because thinking about that, like, how in touch are you with your senses? How in touch are you with your body? Are you embodied, or you're like most people who are completely disembodied from their mind? They are just in behind their eyes. Because I see that so much. And this is where I think Lisa Feldman Barrett's work is so important, because it's teaching us to reconnect to our body, our senses. And what you're going to see next is that the research is showing that our senses have no emotional meaning. Our brains are making those stories up themselves.
So physical changes in your body, the research shows, really have no inherent emotional meaning. Your brain makes them meaningful as emotions. That is, your brain, part of what its job is to make sensations from your body related to the changes in your body, heart rate changes, respiratory changes, and so on, to make them meaningful. And sometimes your brain makes them meaningful as an emotion, so that your brain can figure out what to do next to keep you alive and well. So your brain doesn't encounter a situation and then evaluate it and figure out what the situation means and then react to it with an emotion. Emotions, in a sense, are what situations mean to you in an embodied way. The idea here that I'm suggesting is that contrary to our own experience of things, the phenomenology of what it feels like to have an emotion, emotions actually don't happen to you. They're actually made by you. They're actually made by your brain in concert with information from the world and from your body. And the idea here is that an emotion is an event where your whole brain is making meaning of internal sensations in your body in relation to what's going on around you in the world. And this is how the same ache in your gut can be hunger, can be anxiety or longing, or a feeling of distrust that someone is, not to be trusted.
That to me has profound implications with regards to how we all go about our life. Without having that sense of perception of what is going on within our physical body, we're at the mercy of the emotions that we're feeling and experiencing. Now, later in the video, we're going to cover some deeper, philosophical ideas around this. But looking at it as it is right now and kind of the research that she's shown, it underlines the importance for me to bring awareness into our body. And in particular, more than our awareness in our head. We can get lost in our stories. I get lost in my stories, and we're going to cover some strategies to deal with this, to really put this into action. But whether that's new to you or not, if that's a new concept to you, are you even aware of your body? I've worked with people professionals who have been completely disengaged from their natural cues, their hunger cues, their toilet cues. Those normal day-to-day functions, they're completely switched off because they're caught up in the world within their head. This extends into an area that I've loved researching about the body, and in particular 3 or 2 areas of the body, the gut and the heart. And in the coming weeks, we're going to dive into these in more detail, but to cover the gut communicates with our brain, and so for every 10 bits of information, 9 are going upwards. Around 90% of serotonin, so a neurotransmitter in our brain, is produced in our gut lining. And our gut is a powerful decision maker. And then moving up to our heart, again, our heart is connected to our brain. Our heart has neurons within the heart. So it has its own intuition, intellect that is giving off signals as well. So that's why just being behind your eyes, just being within your head, it can be very, very misleading. And so that opens up the question to me, well, what is the brain for?
That brains didn't evolve for us to think and feel and see. They actually evolved to regulate a body. That your brain's business is budgeting the internal resources of your body, like water and salt and glucose and hormones and so on, to keep you alive and well. And this continuous budgeting process is the reason why your brain evolved. As brains got bigger and environments, what we call an ecological niche, got larger and more complex, neurons had to kind of work together to form a brain to regulate that body in that environment, so that you know whether something up ahead is something that you should eat or whether it might eat you. And this budgeting is your brain's basic job.
Well, our brain's main job is to regulate our body, our temperature, our heartbeat, our respiration. And so that to me is empowering, because we can take control of that. I can take control of my breath when I'm in an anxious state, an anxious physiological state. We're living in an age of disembodiment or disconnection from our bodies, and where it's completely normal to take prescription medication to ease symptoms rather than understanding what the root causes are. Our culture, our technology, and our medicines have made us into poorer and poorer interoceptors. But we do have practices. Yoga, meditation, for example, allows us to reconnect with our body. Okay, on to part 2 of today's video. What your body budget is and how you balance it. Just like companies have a financial budget to manage different accounts, our brain has a budget to manage the different accounts of our body.
Brain is running a budget for your body, and it's not budgeting money, it's budgeting salt and glucose and water and all the things, oxygen, all the things that your cells need to function to keep you alive and well. So it's running this budget. And so you can think of like every new thing that you learn and every movement that you make as an expense on that budget. It's an investment. And everything you eat, every time you sleep, every hug you get from another person or whatever support that you get, those are like deposits.
I think that's a really important point she makes regarding deposits. How often do you feel like you're getting replenished from your day-to-day life? The way I see it is, how energized do I feel after a certain situation? Does a certain form of exercise replenish me, or does it deplete me? Does contact with a person replenish me? Does it lift me, or does it take from me? And of course there can be different dynamics at play, but I think that's something that really goes very, very overlooked. It's easy to see where sleep comes in and where nutrition comes in, but that subtle feeling of when do I feel lifted or when do I feel drained is such an important cue to tune into.
But what if you don't replenish? You're not sleeping well. You don't eat healthfully. You live in a sea of social ambiguity, which is uncertainty is very hard on a nervous system, really expensive. You could be running a body budget, and the deficit is never big. It's the tax you pay is little. It's incremental. It's like a slow drip, and it just bores a hole, over time. So you're just going to feel like shit for a really long time. When you're in a situation like that, you can try all you want to, change how you think. But basically, your body has a grip on your brain. It's a conversation. Your brain is always controlling your body, and your body is sending information back to your brain. But if you are running a body budgeting deficit, you are going to feel like shit. And you may not be able to just think differently, in part because, remember, if we freeze the moment, your brain is representing what's in the world and what's in your body. And that's what it uses to make the next prediction, which becomes your perceptions and your thoughts. So if you are feeling like shit, what is your brain going to direct the thought to? Something negative in the past, something that's similar to the present from the past.
And this underlines the point where she says emotions are made by us. And so that throws in another question, or another context for me anyway, is that, well, there's a responsibility, an even bigger responsibility for us to take responsibility for how we are feeling. And so for how we are feeling are simply our self-care. How well we sleep, how well we eat, how well we look after our body with regards to movement. And I don't just mean hard exercise, but exercise that's replenishing. There's an empowerment to that, as I see. And as she mentions, once we're depleted, and there's that slow drip of depletion over time, once we're in that state, it doesn't matter how much necessary positive talk we have, because it's in our body. Our body is depleted, and our body is going to be communicating with our brain that things are not balanced.
So ruminating and being stuck might be freed up just by getting enough sleep that night. It might be freed up by just providing people with opportunities to have different experiences, and so they direct their attention to the world, and then they can create these different experiences for themselves. But if you're running a body budgeting deficit, it's not a matter of willpower. It could be actually impossible. And you won't be able to create new experiences for yourself, because the two most expensive things your brain can do are move your body and learn something new. Change its own wiring, right? And what do you do when you're running a deficit in your actual bank account? What do you do, Tom?
Stop. No more spending.
Stop spending. And so what does it mean for a brain to stop spending?
Chill, sit.
Become fatigued. You become fatigued. You feel, your body feels heavy, like you can't move. And you stop learning. And you might even stop paying attention to the world. So you're just going with your internal model, the prediction that's running based on your past experience, and you're not even really adjusting to the context at all. And that, my friend, is the beginnings of depression.
And again, to me, this feels like, okay, well, I can take control of something. Those negative thoughts, that negative internal negative chatter that we all have, ongoing, they never stop. They'll never ever stop. But what we can do is begin to direct our awareness, one, into our body, into self-regulation, and two, into, okay, well, how can I influence that? How can I influence my body budget? Have I been sleeping poorly recently? And it's not about, we all know that we need to sleep well, but this is giving an extra multiple layers to the importance of that, because without that, this is why we have these declines. Our past is our past, and we're going to come on to mood, emotion, and affect shortly. But the fact that we can take control of the present moment, of now, we cannot change the past, we can take control of now, which will then influence our future. Okay, on to part 3 of today's video. The difference between mood, emotion, and affect. Looking at this and understanding this has really helped me open up my awareness of and perception of really what I'm experiencing. And so that's why I want to dive into emotion, mood, and affect, and to really kind of lay out, anyway, how Lisa Feldman Barrett sees this through the hardware of our bodies and our brain.
Even though to all of us it feels like emotions are reactions to things that happen in the world, I want to suggest to you that that's actually not the way things work. That our brains are kind of a mastery, they're like a master of deception. Emotions are really better understood as your brain's understanding of what is going on inside your own body in relation to what is happening around you in the world.
So as you can see, our emotions are what our brain creates to make sense of some of the feelings within our body, which is a powerful place to be in, because once we start to become aware of that and we can see and understand that our emotions are not necessarily, they're just made by the brain, and the brain being a trickster. It's not there to harm us, it's there to keep us safe and well and alive. But it's doing its best guess based on our past to create a future based on how we feel in the present moment. And so it's important now to dive into mood and affect, because once you understand that, certainly this is from Lisa Feldman Barrett's point of view, to me it's really helped me feel empowered in taking charge of the present moment.
And so evolution gave us a workaround that hints at our body budget, whether it's generally in balance or whether it's in the red, whether it's running a deficit. When it's generally in balance, you feel okay. And when it's in the red, when it's generally in balance, you feel pleasant or you feel comfortable. When it's not in balance, when you're in the red, when you're running a deficit, you feel pretty crappy. You can feel pretty miserable. You can feel really wretched, actually. And if it goes on for long enough, other systems get involved, like your immune system and so on, and you get sick. You get sick with a metabolic illness, which is heart disease, or cancer, or diabetes, or depression, or anxiety, and if it goes on for long enough, eventually Alzheimer's disease, all of which have a metabolic basis. And this workaround that evolution has given you, this feeling pleasant or feeling unpleasant, feeling really calm and kind of comfortable or feeling kind of wretched, is what we call affect. And affect is a consciousness. It's with you every waking moment of your life because your brain is running your body budget every waking moment of your life. And sometimes when these affective properties are very strong, that's when we make them meaningful as an emotion in this culture. So when I'm having a perception of someone as a complete, but there are children here, as a complete not nice person for cutting me off on the highway, I'm having a perception that is intensely affective, even though my brain might be conjuring it into an emotion.
So looking at that model, we're somewhere between 4 points. We're between pleasant and unpleasant, and we're between aroused and calm. And that's a visceral feeling within us. At any one time, it's with us all of the time in our waking consciousness in every single moment of our life. And so linking to that car example, with that mood or that affect within us is causing us to react to that driver. We can use that example a bit later when we come to part 4 and looking at how do we use this information in our real day-to-day life. But the idea of, when you think of, if we're feeling unpleasant and we're feeling calm, we're more towards the depressive state. When we're feeling unpleasant and more towards aroused, we're more the anxious state. And on the flip side, like when we're feeling pleasant and aroused, we're potentially excited. So you see how this plays out, and it's a very, we need our brain to make sense of things. We need that. But at a core metabolic being, if we're out of balance in our body budget, it's going to sway us towards more unpleasant calm or more unpleasant aroused. And that to me is powerful. And I hope you see that, because our effect can be an incredible source of wisdom for our lives to help us make wiser choices. And understanding that biologic burden of a body budget really reinforces for me the importance of prioritizing our self-care or self-regulatory practices, breathwork, meditation, all those different self-care practices. Okay, on to part 4, final part of this video. I'm really going to look at 3 techniques to use within your life today to really embed and to land these principles that we've been talking about. So one of the main insights I've come to with regards to this is that I am always cultivating my experiences. They're governed by the past, hugely influenced by the past, but until I make an intervention in the present moment, it's going to continue to affect my future. And so the more control we have, the more responsibility we have, because when we feel firsthand and experience that we can change our emotions, it's on us to do that more often. Otherwise, we're just going to get caught up in our narratives, and as you've seen, our narratives are highly influenced by how we feel, how our body budget is, and how we're balancing all of that. And so I want you to see the discomfort of learning something new, of breaking that pattern in the moment, is uncomfortable. But that discomfort is learning. And as I said, we can create a new future by changing the present moment. Because the more we change the present moment, that's going to become more of a normal in the future. So the first tool we're going to look at, or pattern interrupt, that pattern interrupt into changing what we normally do, is an invitation to ask yourself in the moment, does this inform me or does this affect me? So inform me means, what data does this give me? What hard evidence have I got in front of me? So using an analogy of a text message, very common form of people having emotional reactions to text messages. But a piece of information, clear data would be, this person hasn't texted me back yet. Now, an example of the stories or the emotion that we make up about that would be, well, they don't like me, they don't like what I've said. They're all assumptions. But the hard data is, all they haven't done is text me back yet. So does this inform me? Does this affect me? Addresses, how am I feeling within my body? What's going on within my body? Has my heart rate changed? Has my blood pressure changed? Has my respiration, my breath changed? And if it has, we can have a direct effect of that in the present moment. And so this pattern interrupt is all about myself, my world, what I can do for myself to make myself feel better and to be able to see life in a bit of a clearer way. The next technique I want to introduce you to is about expanding that into other people. And this one has implications for the structure of narrative that we have and how much compassion and empathy we show towards other people. And the invitation for this one is to ask yourself, what am I pretending not to know? And so I want you to think about that for a second. And I'm going to bring us back to that car analogy. So that man or woman has cut us up and we've completely judged them straight away. We call them every name under the sun. And that affect that we're having is based on how we feel. But when we ask ourselves, what am I pretending not to know? That begins to open up different options. And what I mean by that is, we can judge them and we can call them every name under the sun. But there are other options that could be at play here. It could be that they're driving recklessly because they're on the way to the hospital because someone they love is seriously injured. It could be that they're driving to the hospital fast because their wife is in labour. And then you could, of course, make up many, many others. But I just want you to see that there are potentials at play that if we don't open up to that, we're pretending not to know that there are other options and we just see it through our eyes. So that's the second one. What am I pretending not to know? The third and final technique I want to introduce you today is direct from Lisa Feldman Barrett. And this is where she describes being the architect of our experience.
You have more control over your emotions than you think you do. I don't mean that you can just snap your fingers and, change how you feel the way that you would change your clothes. But your brain is wired so that if you change the ingredients that your brain uses to make emotion, then you can transform your emotional life. So if you change those ingredients today, you're basically teaching your brain how to predict differently tomorrow. And this is what I call being the architect of your experience. So here's an example. All of us have had a nervous feeling before a test, right? But some people experience crippling anxiety before a test. They have test anxiety. Based on past experiences of taking tests, their brains predict a hammering heartbeat, sweaty hands, so much so that they are unable to actually take the test. They don't perform well, and sometimes they not only fail courses, but they actually might fail college. But here's the thing. A hammering heartbeat is not necessarily anxiety. It could be that your body is preparing to do battle and ace that test. Or, give a talk in front of hundreds of people on a stage where you're being filmed. And research shows that when students learn to make determination, right, this kind of energized determination instead of anxiety, they perform better on tests. And that determination seeds their brain to predict differently in the future so that they can get their butterflies flying in formation. Imagine waking up in the morning. I'm sure you've had this experience. I know I have. You wake up in the morning, and as you're emerging into consciousness, you feel this horrible dread, this like real wretchedness. And immediately your mind starts to race, right? You start to think about all the crap that you have to do at work and that mountain of email, which you will never dig yourself out of, ever, right? And the phone calls you have to return and that important meeting that you have across town. And you're going to have to fight traffic to get there, which means you're going to be late picking your kids up and your dog is sick. And what are you going to make for dinner? And oh my God, right? What is wrong with your life? What's wrong with my life? That mind racing is prediction. Your brain is searching to find an explanation for those sensations in your body that you experience as wretchedness.
And so this is a slight twist on how Gabor Mate describes his work, Compassionate Inquiry. And if you haven't seen that video before, follow the link below. It's just below, and you can watch that after this one. But he describes the process of uncovering the root cause of an emotional trigger as the archaeology of the mind. So you're gently sweeping away the story to relieve or reveal the core trauma from childhood. But as you can see, Lisa Feldman Barrett is all about being the architect of our experience. And so if you look on the graph now, and you can see those 4 points that we hover between all the time, we kind of move around between. If you look at aroused, it can be anxious or it can be excited. And the best place I've seen this used was when I was working with Olympic snowboarders and the slopestyle and halfpipe. And as you can imagine, what they do is extraordinary, dangerous, and even though it's their day-to-day, they still feel anxiety and they still feel fear. But they are the best people that I've seen use this in regards to, well, they change the narrative about that. I'm excited, I can't wait to drop in, I'm excited to do this, I'm excited to whatever the trick is going to be. And we can process this, we can change, we can be the architect. And so if we do that in the moment, of course it takes work and it's difficult at the time, but the more we do it on a repetition basis, that becomes our normal in the future. So next time you're feeling anxious about going to meet someone, going on a date, or going to a social environment, for example, begin to have that discussion with yourself that I'm excited about this. As Dr. Barrett said, a higher heart rate doesn't mean anxious, it just means aroused. It's an arousal state. And so we can flip that, we can switch from anxiety into excitement. And I invite you to give that a go and to see what comes up for you, because for me, in my own life, that has been profound. So beginning to wrap up this video, for me, this is a powerful part of the picture. I hope you've seen from what's been covered here in Lisa Feldman Barrett's work is that we really are in a place of empowerment in the moment, because we can intercept those feelings, those interoceptive feelings, before they become made up by the brain. But it does ask bigger questions for me anyway, personally, is, well, what are those sensations within our body? And another question for me is, well, are those sensations trauma? And the trauma being held up in our body in the form of trapped energy. And these are topics I'm going to cover in the coming weeks. But this is something that I have come to believe very, very true. And this is why today is just part of the picture. I don't believe it's as simple as boiling it down to just this, even though these techniques and Lisa Feldman Barrett's approach is very, very profound in my experience. You know, discussions around consciousness come up as well, and that's a very hard topic to pin down in the scientific realm. But the bigger question would be, well, who is the viewer witnessing the brain do this? And of course, as I said, science can't answer that right now, but we all have the ability and capability to experience and get to know those answers. And through my subjective experience, through meditation, through breath work, through different non-ordinary states of consciousness, I've experienced my true self in a place of complete serenity, peace, bliss, and at one with myself. And if this is new to you, then that's a journey that maybe you want to investigate, maybe you don't. But I hope these begin to open up some questions for you, because the more these questions open up, the more we get to understand these deeper layers of ourselves. But as I said, I love this work by Lisa Feldman Barrett, and I think it's highly useful to understand the hardware of our body and our brains and how our emotions stem from them. And I sense that this is a part to the bigger picture with regards to our perception, awareness, and intuition. And all those extrasensory abilities that we all have ability to reconnect with if we practice. And my belief is that we are highly profound beings of light, and we've just got stuck. We've got stuck in our heads listening to that narrative that keeps going on and on and on. And as you've seen, our brain is the trickster. A trickster trying to keep us alive and keep us well, but even so, it's still a trickster because it's a predictive machine. So now over to you. I would love to hear how you're going to use these tools, how this has helped you. Please comment below. If you're new to self-care, you can click the guide below, our 4 simple steps to self-care. It's a free guide for you to download. And there are video tutorials on how to use movement to ease chronic pain. You will learn how to switch into a growth mindset. You will also learn how to change your nutrition to improve your health. And you'll learn how to get the best night's sleep you've had in ages. Plus there'll be some really quite profound breathwork techniques that you can use in the moment. And it's free for you to download, just click the link below. As well, the videos that we've referenced in this today are below. Gabor Mate is the Compassionate Inquiry, and there are some body scanning videos and meditation videos for you below to give it a go if you're new to that, to help you develop that interoceptive skill. So if you haven't already, just to remind you, please subscribe to our channel, and thank you so much for joining me today, and I look forward to seeing you on another episode.